Ready to get started. Nazir Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, 6 lines down. Much better. Amar le Abaye. Abaye and Rav Dimi were having this dialogue. Yesterday in their dialogue, they were discussing whether or not there was a uniqueness to this din that we had seen, that heter is mitzaref le'isur, which is what we started with, based on the pasuk of Mishras. The pasuk of Mishras means that a person shouldn't be having any flavorings at all of wine if they're a Nazir. And based on that, Rabbi Yochanan on the bottom of Lamed Hey Amid Beis had said that in general, ein heter is mitzaref le'isur, but when it comes to Nazir, yes, it's a chiddush, and that is going to be based on the pasuk of Mishras. We'll see today that that's actually subject to a debate as to what the source is. Everyone agrees to the din that heter is mitzaref le'isur. The question is, what is the source? Is it Mishras or is it something else? And we're going to dig into that today. And that's also going to be coupled together with another limud, which is very similar. So this preamble is important. We've learned about this idea called heter mitzaref le'isur. Heter mitzaref le'isur is when you're taking elements of food that are isur and elements of food that are mutter, and you are combining them into one halachic unit to make them isur. There is another halachic idea called ta'am ke'ikr. Ta'am ke'ikr is not so much about the volume, but more about the flavoring. And according to this approach of ta'am ke'ikr, let's say that you made a stew. There was potatoes and there was treif meat. Now, you take out the treif meat and you're only eating the potatoes. What? You're only eating the potato. This is the hechsher for rocket barbecue. This is what they cook. This is what it is.
I mean,
wow.
Let's say kosher style.
So,
Full disclosure.
yeah, someone's not eating from the barbecue. Sous vide is out.
We should have gotten a cheap pricing then.
Yeah. So tam ki'ikr is like this. If the meat was treif and the potato was a regular potatoes can't be treif. But if they now have the flavoring of meat and the meat was treif, tam ki'ikr is a din that the potato has the same halachic status as the meat. Now, these ideas are similar. It's heter mitzaref le'isur and it's tam ki'ikr. They're very, very similar. And we'll see that some Tanaim, learn that the idea of tam ki'ikr is learned from Mishras instead of learning heter mitzaref le'isur is learned from Mishras. So that's going to be our sugya today, is these two halachic areas of heter mitzaref le'isur and tam ki'ikr, how do they interplay? So a long preamble, more than usual. Amar le Abaye. Mimai, how do you know Dahai Mishras is leheter mitzaref le'isur hu da'asa? How do you know that really Mishras is the source for heter mitzaref le'isur? Dilma, perhaps the word Mishras is to teach us litain tam ki'ikr hu da'asa. Maybe it's not like we initially thought. Maybe heter mitzaref le'isur, yes, we all believe in it, but it's not from Mishras. Maybe Mishras is teaching me tam ki'ikr, mehecha tesi. Says the Gemara, Abaye, you sound a little schizophrenic. Why? Because the Gemara says, Ula Abaye, did you show up to shiur yesterday? Me'ikara yesterday, kakashale mai deka'ama revdimi, v'kamosi v'leikol halin tiyuvta. You were cheppering him yesterday, lamed vav amid beis, with brisa after brisa, about whether or not we hold that that bichtei achilas pras is a din d'oraisa or a din d'rabanan. And then hadar amar le'elitein tam ki'ikr. Now you're changing gears, and what's going on here? By the way, this is a very odd question. Why can't he ask a question? He's just asking another question. That's what the Gemara says. Your basar deshanile, after he answered up all the questions, Rav Dimi, then Abaye changed gears. Amar le dilma litain tam ki'ikr da'asa. And by the way, Abaye has a great reason to assume that this is possible. Abaye's question of the fact that maybe Mishras is coming to teach us about tam ki'ikr has a beautiful marimakom. Look at this. Quarter of the way down. The Brisa writes, look at this. Mishras, the pasuk of Mishras by Nazir, litain tam ki'ikr. So clear. So now we had the previous shita. We were saying, no, Mishras is heter mitzaref le'isur. This brisa, there's like no wiggle room. There's not even a debate about it. Mishras is not teaching us about heter mitzaref le'isur. Mishras is teaching me about tam ki'ikr. And what does the brisa say in continuation? Shim shara anavim b'mayim. If you take grapes and you put them inside water, and then after you remove the grapes, yesh b'hem tam yayin, and you're a Nazir, chayev. That's mamish tam ki'ikr based on the pasuk of Mishras. So that throws a question in our direction. We started out yesterday saying that the reason we know heter is mitzaref le'isur is because of Mishras. This brisa says no. Mishras is not here to teach me about heter mitzaref le'isur. Mishras is here to teach me about tam ki'ikr. And the brisa continues, and this is something that we can extrapolate from here, from the world of Nazirus, and apply outward to the rest of the world of halacha, not just by Nazir, but like the example I gave, if you have the kosher potato with the non-kosher meat is removed, but the potato retains the flavor, chayif, you're not allowed to eat that food. That's achilas iser, that's eating treif. Okay, and the brisa continues. And when we say that we're sharing this idea far and wide, here's what it means. Uman Nazir, just like in regards to Nazir, she'ein isuro iser olam. Nazir is not a permanent state. It's only 30 days. Ve'ein isuro iser hana. And you can still sell stocks in the wine company you own. There's no iser hana on the wine itself. And not only that, v'yesh heter le'isura, we know that in due time you can get, not in due time, we know that you can get out of your status of iser with she'elas chacham as a Nazir. There asa botam ke'ikr. In such a case scenario where there's a limited, unique set of rules by Nazirus that allows for Tam Kicker to be true, then what about Kilaya Kerem, for example, where She'isur and Isser Olam, the Kilayim never go away, the status always remains. The Isur and Isser Hanoya, you're not allowed to benefit from it. The Ein Heter Le'isuran, and you can't go to the Rav and say, I hereby made a mistake, please be matir for me. In that case, Eino Den Sheyasabo Tam Kicker. Of course, it should be that there's Tam Kicker. So this is how the brisa formulates on two levels. Number one, that Mishras, we're asking, maybe Mishras is not talking about Heter Mitzaref Isser. Maybe Mishras is talking about Tam Kicker. And not only that, but it doesn't only apply to the world of Nazir. We can apply it far and wide, even in cases like Hilei HaKerem. And then the brisa just ends with these few words, V'hu adin la'orla b'shtayim. What does this mean, la'orla b'shtayim? It means that Orla has two out of the three boxes that we were just discussing. What were the boxes we were discussing? Isser Olam, and we had Isser Hanoya, and we had Heter Le'isuro. So it's not Isser Olam, but the other two are true. It's not Isser Olam. Orla ends after 3 years. 4th year is Neter Avai, that's Mutter. Okay, that's the end of the brisa. And this is our question. Let's review the question. Yesterday, in the bottom of Lamed Hamid Beis, we started with the din of Rav Yochanan, that we know that Heter is Mistaref Le'isser from the pasuk of Mishras. And the Gemara says, Abai is asking Rav Dimi, I don't hear you, because when I see the word Mishras in this brisa is crystal clear. This brisa seems to say that Tam is Ke'ikr. So which one is it? And the Gemara responds halfway down as follows. Amar leha hume Rabbanon. Rebbe Abahu ki ka'amar leRebbe Akiva. If you look back on the bottom of Lamed Hamid Beis, you'll see that the line of Rav Yochanan at the 2 dots, 4 lines from the bottom, it says Amar Rebbe Abahu, Amar Rav Yochanan. That Rebbe Abahu that we have on the bottom of Lamed Hamid Beis, when it says that Mishras is the source for Heter Mitzaref Le'isser, that is all within the camp of Rebbe Akiva. But you're right. The Rabbanon actually hold differently. The Rabbanon hold that Mishras does not teach me about Heter Mitzaref Le'isser, but rather that the word Mishras teaches me about Tam Ke'ikr. So we have a machlokes tanaim as to what the word Mishras teaches us. According to Rebbe Akiva, it teaches me a unique din in Nazirus, the Heter Mitzaref Le'isser. And according to the Rabbanan, the word Mishras has nothing to do with Heter Mitzaref Le'isser. According to the Rabbanan, the word Mishras teaches me of Tam Ke'ikr. Good. Says the Gemara halfway down, Lamed Zayin and Aleph, hey, Rabbi Akiva, which shita of Rabbi Akiva did you see this from, where he holds that Mishras teaches me about Heter Mitzaref Le'isser? Where do we see Rabbi Akiva holding of Heter Mitzaref Le'isser? So says the Gemara, Ilema, if you want to say Rabbi Akiva, Dehacha, the Rabbi Akiva from our Mishnah, and our Mishnah is found on the top of Lamed Hamid Beis, and there maybe it said the following, Ditnan, Rabbi Akiva Omer Afilu Shara Pito B'Yayin, what did we see over there? That if I take my piece of bread and I dip it into my cup of wine, and all in, when you add up the challah and you add up the wine, the volume of what I'm looking at is now a kizayis, and therefore we see that Rabbi Akiva must hold that there's this din of Heter Mitzaref Le'isser. Says the Gemara, that's not a good marimako. Umimai. Perhaps that's not what's going on in that source. Dilma, perhaps hudeika kizayis be'ena. Maybe really there's enough wine on its own for the Isser. Says the Gemara, if there's enough wine on its own for the Isser, why are you talking about the bread? Just talk about the wine. Says the Gemara, that this is so obvious. No, maybe the reason why it was listed this way was la'afuke mitanakama, to reject the sheets of the Tanakama, to Amar ad sheyishte revi'is yayin. He had to include a food that was volume based to reject the sheets of the Tanakama, who says that the Isser of yayin for a Nazir is not volume based but liquid measure based. It's based on revi'is. So therefore, this source is not a good source from which we can learn that Rabbi Akiva holds of Heter Mitzaref Le'isser, because that Mishnah may have had the full volume of wine, And the only reason it was framed in regards to pito with biyayin was to reject the previous shita of the Gemara, of the Tanakama, who wanted to say that the Isser of Nazirus by yayin had to do with a liquid measure and not with a volume measure. So therefore, what's the source of Rabbi Akiva's shita of heter mitzaref le'isser? Says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, end of the line, El Rabbi Akiva de Braisa. We have a Braisa which indicates Rabbi Akiva's shita. What is his shita? De Tanya, the Braisa writes, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Nazir sheshara pito b'yayin. And then here are the key words. Ve'achal kizayis mipas umiyayin. And you ate one kizayis comprised of two foods, wine and bread, then chayiv. Good, we have our Mari Makom, and now let's review. Machlokes Tanaim. What do we say that the word mishras in the Torah comes to teach us? The word mishras in the Torah comes to teach us that, according to Rabbi Akiva, that we have this principle called heter mitzaref le'isser. And according to the sheet of the Rabbanan, they say, I believe in that idea, but not from that word. According to the Rabbanan, the word mishras does teach me something, but it doesn't teach me heter mitzaref le'isser, but rather ta'am ke'ikr. And that brings us to where we are right now, the next part of our Gemara, 12 lines or so from the bottom of the page, Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. I was learning yesterday with my son at the yeshiva. We learned Night Seder together, me and a couple of his friends. And we were discussing the following idea. This only happens in Judaism. There are times in halacha where you can do one action on one day, and it's a mitzvah deoraisa, and the same act the next day earns you an Isser Kares. Only Jews have this. You have Hilchos Nida on one day. To be Meshamish Mitzvah can be a mitzvah deraisa, mitzvah of Ona, the mitzvah of Purvu. The next day, after she's Pereses Nida, is her deraisa. On the day of Erev Yom Kippur, we have this idea that Kol ha'ochel b'tshi kilu tzam be'asiri, according to some it's a mitzvah deraisa, to eat on the 9th day of Tishrei. Mitzvah deraisa, one day to eat, burger. The next day you eat the same burger, you're chayav. And Nazir is also wine before your Nazir. It could be a mitzvah, most midrabanan. We don't really have a mitzvah deraisa to drink wine in halacha, but we do have many mitzvahs derabanan. That's to be even by Kiddush. We even say Zachrei ala yayin. It doesn't mean Medina that you need it. It's just it's a Kiddush-dik idea. By the way, the kids were mispal about that there's such a thing. In secular, we don't have that in like American law. Because we're dynamic. They don't have this kind of level of dynamics. And okay, anyways, sidebar. Let's continue. Amar le Rav Acha b'rei de Rav Avia le Rav Ashi. I have to call something out, says the Gemara. The Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, the kamokim le Lahai v'chol mishras lahatim mitzaref le'isser. According to Rabbi Akiva, who we just clarified in the Gemara, says that mishras teaches me that heter is mitzaref le'isser. Okay, litain tam ki'ikr minole. We know that he accepts the principle of tam ki'ikr that's found throughout Shas. We'll learn about it much more extensively when we get into other Maseches. So, what's Rabbi Akiva's source for tam ki'ikr? If the Rabbanan are using mishras, Rabbi Akiva can't use mishras because mishras is taken. The Rabbanan use mishras as the source for tam ki'ikr, as we saw. That's the Braisa. So what's Rabbi Akiva's source that tam ki'ikr is true? Says the Gemara, answer number 1, which will get rejected. Yalif mi basar b'chalav. Tam is ki'ikr. When you mix the two flavors together, they become asr. Any one on their own is not asr. The two of them combined together is asr. Says the Gemara, lav tam be'almahu, it's just a regular tam, ve'asr. We see that it's just a regular flavor. It's two mutter foods. The way that they're combined in halacha makes it asr. That's tam ki'ikr, says the Gemara. And hachanami lo shna, we'd say the same thing in general over here, that in regards to tam ki'ikr, and in regards to nazirus, in regards to anything, tam ki'ikr should be true. Says the Gemara v'Rabbanon. If Rabbi Akiva has the Mari Makom of basar b'chalav for tam ki'ikr, so why do the Rabbanon use mishras? Why don't they use basar b'chalav as the source for tam ki'ikr? Says the Gemara v'Rabbanon, 7 lines from the bottom, mi basar b'chalav lo gamrinon de chidushu. You can't learn anything from the world of basar b'chalav because basar b'chalav is a chiddush. Says the Gemara, my chidushay. What is the uniqueness of basar b'chalav? Ilema, if you want to say that the chiddush of basar b'chalav is the ha'luchudei shari, that each one in their own right is mutter. I'm allowed to have American cheese and I'm allowed to have a skirt steak. I just can't have the two of them together. And then only ubahade adade aser. Well, that's not a chiddush because kilayim nami ha'luchudei shari v'ha'luchudei shari ubahade adade aser. You can't say that the chiddush of basar b'chalav is that they're both mutter on their own, and when they combine their aser, we have a lot of examples like that. The classical one would be kilayim. Both foods are mutter, but you're not allowed to grow them together. So that can't be the chiddush. Ella says the Gemara, the itaru lekule yoma bechalva, that if you take a piece of meat and your taru, tough and shin in Aramaic or interchangeable shora, you take the milk You take the meat and you put the piece of meat in milk and let it sit all day. So it says the Gemara, that's mutter. You can take out that piece of meat, you can rinse it off, and you can eat it. That's fine, no problem at all. That's why the Gemara says, great pickup, kula yoma. It's most of the day. It's not a full day. It's not me'es la'es. And that would only be midrabanan anyway. It's only bishul derabanan. Bishul deraisa requires heat. Bishul derabanan is kabush k'mubushel. So a couple answers to get out of that. That's a great question. I think the better answer actually is that it's derabanan. Either way, the Gemara says is that you're allowed to eat that meat. By the way, this comes up in Maseches Chulin about eating the udder, the chal of a cow, that because it has so many open porous cavities within the chal to hold milk, so it's a big deal in the Gemara how you're allowed to eat a chal, because I understand that it's basar and there's some chalav in it. So the Gemara says you have to cut a shesiv, you have to like dice it and press it against the wall to drain out all, and then you're allowed to eat it. But this is just milk on the outside. It doesn't absorb into it's not a chal. This is a regular piece of steak. And not only is that true, says the Gemara, that you're allowed to take that meat out and eat it. Only cooking it is aser. So that's what the Gemara recommends might be the chiddush. So says the Gemara, wow, okay, if that's a chiddush, then how can Rabbi Akiva use it to learn anything? If it's taka true that there is a chiddush in regards to basar b'chalav, that you're allowed to take basar and stick it in chalav and take it out and eat it, and only with heat is it going to be asur to cook, that's a chiddush, fine. Then according to Rabbi Akiva, then it's a chiddush. And if it's a chiddush, then you can't use it as a marimakam for tam ke'ikr. So therefore, the Gemara pivots to another answer. Rabbi Akiva, nami basar b'chalav d'chidushu. You're not allowed to use this as your source anymore because ein lecha bo el chidusho. And the Gemara says, Ella, turning to the top of Lamed Zayin and Bebeis, yalif mi gi'ule ovdei kochavim. We have a din called hag'ala, which we are all about to get overly familiar with over the course of the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks. Oh my, 5 weeks until Pesach. Hag'ala is this din. The din of Hagala is that when we took the kalim from Midjan, the Amar Rachmana, Kol Davar Asher Yavo Be'esh, anything that they cooked with fire, we have to reheat with fire to remove that food. That's what Hagala is. And Kederach Bishulo, however the Blia of the Isser got in, that's how the Blia of the Isser has to come out. So if it got in with Libun Chamor, then it has to be removed with Libun Chamor. Like when Libun Kal. A toaster oven, a toaster. You gotta come up with all the right methods to remove everything. Lememra, what does that teach me? De Asire Giule Ovdei Kochavim. We see that the giule, the removals from the pot, are aser to eat from an Ovdei Kochavim. What does that show you? Ta'am ke'ikr. It shows you that the flavorings in the wall are problematic. Lav ta'am ba'almahu, isn't it after all only simply a tam? Nevertheless, v'aser hachanami loshna. Therefore, in general, we should hold to this principle of tam ke'ikr. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva has a new marimakah. Now he doesn't say that we learn the isser of tam ke'ikr from basar b'chalav. Rather, Rabbi Akiva learns the isser of tam ke'ikr from the world of gi'ule nachrim, the source from which we learn hagalas kelim. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. If taka, it's true that we found a good rule, a good source, I should say, for learning tam ke'ikr. If gi'ule nachrim is a great source to learn tam ke'ikr, then why is it that only Rabbi Akiva learns that way? Why don't the Rabbanan learn that way? Amar le. Rav Dimi says back to him, Hasam chidushu. Over there, that's a chiddush as well. And in the Chabal chidusha, why is there a chiddush? Tabechola Torah kula, no sein tam lifkam mutter. In general, when you have a flavoring that comes out of a pot, and it mixes in with your food, even if you literally like wipe it with your finger and stick it in your mouth, typically we say that's no sein tam lifkam. The flavoring that comes out is a negative flavor, and therefore, even though the blia is technically treif, but it doesn't matter because it's no sein tam lifkam, and therefore it's mutter. But v'gabe gi'ule ovdei kochavim aser. So therefore, if that's true, the Rabbanan they did a good job. They said there's still something unique happening here with Gi'ule Ovdei Kochavim. You're saying that the Gi'ule Ovdei Kochavim is no saying tam lishvach. You're saying that it's a positive flavor and aser, that's tam ki'ikr. But that's not normal. That's a chiddush, only by Gi'ule Nachrim. So says the Gemara, will Rabbi Akiva Nami, if that's true, that there's a chiddush aspect of Gi'ule Ovdei Kochavim, then how can you use Gi'ule Kochavim as your source for tam ki'ikr? So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna bar Chia, And these next two lines of Gemara answer about 90% of the shilas that we have when we make mistakes in our kitchen. Says the Gemara, Lo asra Torah, ela lekedera bas yoma. The only time that there is an isser of tam l'shvach, the only time we assume that the blios, that which is drawn out of the walls during the cooking process, is problematic, is when the kedera is a bas yoma. A kedera that's a bas yoma is a kedera that's used within 24 hours. At 2 p.m., I make macaroni and cheese, boiling hot cheese, bubbling up the sides of the pot. Wash it out, and now I want to cook fleishiks in it. That, under those circumstances, that tam is deoraisa tam l'shvach. It is the same as the cheese itself. Delav no same tam lifgamu. That's not bad. That's actually a good flavor. The Rabbanon, according to the rabbis, kedera bas yoma nami, e efshar de lo pagma porta. The rabbis hold that there's still going to be some element of chiddush, is that even within that day, there's no way that the blios stay just as fresh as the initial dish 10 hours later, 12 hours later, up to 24 hours later. Okay. So therefore, we have our Mari Makomos. And the Mari Makomos, I actually made a little chart. I meant to print it out for you, but I forgot. And I'll show you for those of you who are here. Look, see? There you go. It says like this.
Your image is mirrored.
I know. Does it come out that way? Oh. It says the Gemara, we have two categories. We have Heter Mitzaref L'Isser. Rabbi Akiva says the source is Mishras. We didn't learn the Rabbanon source for Heter Mitzaref L'Isser. But in regards to Tam Ke'ikr, we know the Rabbanon use Mishras. And the Chiddush that we just learned is that Rabbi Akiva learns that Tam Ke'ikr is learned out from the world of Gi'ulei Nachrim. And that brings us to the next little sugya, and we're going to be stopping at the top of Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, 8 lines down at the 2 dots. So we still have a little bit of a ways to go. Let's continue. Amar le Rav Acha breder Rav Abir le Rav Ashi. Mid Rabbanon, from the sheet of the rabbis that we just saw in the Brisa, Nishma le Rabbi Akiva. We can learn something about Rabbi Akiva. Lav Amrei, didn't we learn that according to the Rabbanon, Hai Mishras is Litain Tam Ke'ikr? We learned, according to the Rabbanon, that the word Mishras, which we have by Nazir, comes to teach me about Tam Ke'ikr. Umikana Tadan L'chol Yisur and Shabbator, like we saw in the Brisa. And from there, we learned that Tam Ke'ikr is not only sourced in the pasuk of Mishras, but we also saw that it expands to other areas of halacha as well, beyond Nazirus. The Rabbi Akiva Nami. Here's what we can then extrapolate about Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Akiva too, the kamokim lahai mishras lahetim mitzaref leisser. That which Rabbi Akiva said, which we learned in the name of Rabbi Yochanan yesterday, that the word misras teaches me that heter is mitzaref leisser. Lema, perhaps we can say that just like the Rabbanon extrapolated Tam Ke'ikr to the entire world of halacha, perhaps here too mikana tadan l'chol isser and Shabbatorah. Perhaps we can say that heter mitzaref leisser is a broader isser, and not just by Nazirus, but maybe it applies everywhere. Says the Gemara, Omar Le, what would Rabbi Akiva say to that? No way. Why not? Mishum dehavi Nazir v'chata shnei ksuven abayin ke'echad. The psukim by Nazirus and the psukim by chatas both teach us about this idea of heter mitzaref le'isser. And because, and we've seen this in Shas a number of times before, whenever we have two psukim teaching the same singular din, then we apply the following rule. V'chol shnei ksuven abayin ke'echad ein melamdin. This is one of the rules of analysis in Chumash. When you see one pasuk, let's say a pasuk by Nazir, we learn, according to Rabbi Akiva, we learn the Mishras teaches heter mitzaref le'isser. And we have a pasuk by Chatas, which teaches us heter mitzaref le'isser. And nowhere else in the Torah is this idea found. So now these two ideas were taught with specificity in only these two areas. And it's no longer expandable to anything else. This principle is called Shnei Ksuven Abayin Ke'echad. And whenever we have these two ideas that are taught in two different psukim, it's a super limited din. It only applies in these two areas. So nice try. You wanted to say that just like the Rabbanon expanded Tam Ke'ikr everywhere, so to Rabbi Akiva should expand heter mitzaref le'isser everywhere? Not allowed. Because we have two sources that teach us Tam Ke'ikr, that teach us heter mitzaref le'isser. One is Nazir, one is Chatas. And therefore, it's Shnei Ksuven Abayin Ke'echad and Ein Melamdin. You cannot extrapolate any further. Nazir Hade Amran. Nazir was the Gemara we started with 2 days ago. That was the Gemara of Rav Yochanan, which we now know is on the heels of Rabbi Akiva. That Mishras teaches us about heter mitzaref le'isser. And what about Chatas? Chatas Maihi. Where do we see that heter mitzaref le'isser is a din by the world of Chatas? Says the Gemara Tanya. We're halfway down Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. The Brisa writes in regards to a korban chatas, kol asher yigabiv sarah yikdash. Anything that it touches becomes sanctified. Yachal afilu shelo bala. Maybe that other item, let's say there's a shlamim that's next to the chatas. Maybe that other item didn't absorb yet. Tamalam rabiv sarah. That only if the shlamim absorbs the chatas will it be problematic. And says the Gemara, ad sheyivla biv sarah yikdash lios kamoha. If I have a chatas next to a shlamim, and the fats of the chatas start bubbling, they're boiling hot, and the shlamim absorbs some of that chatas fats into the shlamim. If that happens, she'im psula hi yipasel, she'im psula hi yipasel. If there's psula by one chatas, it will then apply to the shlamim. Vim kshera tochal kechamor sheba. Then the shlamim would then have to be treated with the stringencies of the chatas. So what do we see from here? We see that this is shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad, because what do we see from here? Heter is mitztarif le'isser. You have the shlamim, and you have the isser of the chatas, the fats, and if the chatas becomes tamei, then heter mitztarif le'isser, and the shlamim becomes tamei. So says Rabbi Akiva, I can't expand any further than the Torah will allow me. And in the world of heter mitztarif le'isser, it's shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad. Our pasuk by Nazirus of Mishras, and the pasukim over here, v'chol asher yigabiv sarah yikdash, that we see heter mitztarif le'isser, and Rabbi Akiva is good and clear. He's not allowed to expand the din of heter mitztarif le'isser any further than halacha will allow it. V'Rabbanan, listen, this is a great argument. Now we have our two Mari Makomos of Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad. What do the Chachamim say about that? The Rabbanan say, no, tzriche. We needed both. It wasn't a classical case of each case teaching me the same din. I needed both cases to offset a misunderstanding, like a regular tzrichus. According to Rabbi Akiva, they are both identical cases, and the repetition of identical cases triggers the din of just read it. What is it? According to the Rabbanan, no. Yes, the din is taught in two places, but because I would have misunderstood something without both of them. They're not identical dinim. They offset things. So what's the tzrichus of the Rabbanan? We're 2/3 of the way down. Rabbanan tzriche. Dikas of Rachman agabe chatas. If I only had the din of heter mitztarif le'isser in regards to a chatas, hava amina nazir lo asimina mishum de nazir mikachim lo yalfinan. I might have thought that Nazir, which is not in the camp of Kachim, can't be learned from the world of a chatas. So therefore, I needed the case of Nazir. And on the flip side, the cost of Rahman Agabe Nazir, had I only had the din of heter mitzaref l'isur by the case of a Nazir, havamina min Nazir lo yalfina mishum de chamir isure. I would have thought that there's a chiddush in Nazir that you can't extrapolate that din back over to chatas. What's the chiddush by Nazir? Dafilu chartzan asir le. Even this pit, even the seed of a grape is asir. That's not even a food. It's not even edible. Okay, you pop it in your mouth. It's nothing. So therefore, the Rabbanan says back to Rabbi Akiva, this is not shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad. It's not two identical dinim being taught twice. It's two dinim that are needed to offset misunderstandings from one another. So therefore, it's not shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad. You should be expanding your din just like I expanded by Nazir. Just like I expanded Tam Kicker across the Torah, you should be expanding heter mitzaref l'isur. Don't argue that it's shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad. It's not. It's a tzricha. So says the Gemara, Hilkach lo asimina. Therefore, you can't learn from one another. Rabbi Akiva, what would he say? Rabbi Akiva, Amar lach, lemay tzriche. That's not right. They're not both required. How does he ruin the tzrichus of the Rabbanon? Says the Gemara as follows. You're right on one side. I agree to one thing that you said, the Rabbanon. I agree to one thing. If we only had the case of chatas, you're 100% right. We couldn't have brought that over to the world of Nazir because you can't learn kachim and chulin from one another. Ella, lichtov rachmana ben Nazir. All the Torah needed to do is write one word, mishras, v'teisi chatas minei. And I would have been able to extrapolate from the world of Nazirus back to the world of chatas. Because, as a general rule, we're able to learn from Nazirus to other places. This is a very difficult piece of Gemara. What happened to the concerns of the Rabbanon? Why are you now all of a sudden you're now allowed to learn? So they learn differently. They have different approaches. Okay, Rabbanon, if this is true, then the question is thrown back at you. You thought that it was really a regular case of a tzrichusa. The case of the chatos was needed because of X, and the case of Nazirus was needed was because of Y, and it's not really shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad. Comes along Rabbi Akiva and says, it's not a tzrichusa. I could have learned everything from the Pesukim and Nazirus. But Rabbanan, what would they say? Amrei lach, chatas leheter mitzaref le'isur. Chatas teaches me about heter mitzaref le'isur. V'chulin mikachim lo gamrinon. Umishras litain tam ki'ikr. Mikana tadan l'chol yisurin shebatorah. Here the Rabbanan state their full opinion. What are they saying? The word chatas, or not the word chatas, but the parsha of chatas, the brisa, teaches me about leheter mitzaref le'isur. And chulin mikachim lo gamrinon. And the word mishras teaches me about tam ki'ikr, and I am allowed to expand it. Rabbi Akiva, what do you say in regards to the Rabbanan? Tarvaihu leheter mitzaref le'isur. Really, both cases are about heter mitzaref le'isur. We end this piece of the sugya as two ships in parallel, passing in the night. They just have different approaches to how we look at the world of Nazir. Can Nazir be extracted and extrapolated to other places, yes or no? That is a machlokas Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan that remains throughout this sugya. Last little sugya for the night. Says the Gemara, last short line, 4 lines from the bottom of the page on Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Amar le Rav Ashi le Rav Kahana. Elahad Tanya, what about the following brisa? The brisa says, based on the pasuk, Mikol Asher Ya'aseh, Migefen HaYayin, what does this pasuk teach us? Limeid Alisurei Nazir, Shehein Mitztarfim Zein Zeh. That if you have 2 different things that are aser, that they're mitztarif. So the Gemara says, I don't understand how Rabbi Akiva understands this. The Rabbi Akiva, Hashta Yesh Lomar, you've already taught us that heter is mitzaref le'isur. If heter is mitzaref le'isur, why do I need a pasuk in Chumash to teach me that isur le'isur mibaya? Look at what the brisa taught. The brisa said, Limit al isurei nazir she mitzarfim zeim zeh. Red wine and white wine. The Gemara asks on Rabbi Akiva, if heter is mitzaref to isur, then red wine is mitzaref to white wine. Why in the world would you bring another? Something's wrong here. Something's wrong. You already told me based on the psukim. You already told me that heter is mitzaref le'isur. So now I need a brisa to tell me that 2 types of wines combine. Pleasure that they combine, of course. Amar le Rabbi Akiva, brilliant Rabbi Akiva. Last line, heter le'isur bivas achas. When is it that heter and isur combine? That's when you're eating the heter v'isur at the same time. The bread dipped in wine. Isur le'isur afilu b'zechar zeh. The chiddush of this brisa, which teaches me that the red wine and the white wine can be combined for isur. Pashut, if you're drinking them in the same cup, they're going to be asur. But even if they're in different cups, each one is a little bit more than half the shiur. So you drink 51% of one, put the cup down. 51% of the other, and put the cup down. You're chayiv. So that Rabbi Akiva gets out of that. Brisa is not a kasha on me. The Brisa is talking about isur and isur. That's not bivas achas. That's only b'zeh zeh. The Reb Shimon, turning to the top of Maseches Amud Aleph, the less late seiruf, according to Reb Shimon, a shita we saw last time, who doesn't hold of seiruf, and if you take a look at the Rivan, he writes here at the top, afilu b'chol shu mechayiv, even with less than a shiur. What does he do? Mikol asher yaseh, because Mikol asher yaseh was telling us that they're mitzaref, the shiurim are mitzaref by the white wine and the red wine. But according to Reb Shimon, you don't need a shiur. It's an isur b'mashu. So according to him, what's the point of psukim? My darish bey. Amar Lach, what would Reb Shimon tell you? Hahumi boile, to teach us le'olam eino nazir ashi yazir mikulim. That pasuk teaches us that even according to Reb Shimon, who says that there's no shiur, okay, there's no shiur. But at the end of the day, what is the case? What is the case is that you cannot become a nazir only from wine, or only from tuma, or only from haircuts. You need all 3 pieces together. That's what he learned from this drasha. We saw this early in the Masechet as well. Last little din, Amar Rabbi Abo, another din, Amar Rabbi Elazar, very similar to what we started with 2 days ago. Kol revi'iyo sheba Torah. Every time we see a shiur revi'is in the Torah, ein heter mitzaref le'isur. In general, a heter will not be mitzaref to the isur. Chutz mirvi'is sheba Nazir. Shari Amar Torah mishras. Another shita that sounds very similar to what we learned 2 days ago. Asks the Gemara, Ma'ika bein Rabbi Yochanan the Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan taught the same din 2 days ago on the bottom of Lamed Hey Amud Beis. There, the Gemara said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and the language is almost identical. Kol Yisur and Shabbat Torah ain't het mitzaref le'isur chutz mi'isur Nazir. Here, what are we saying? Kol Revi'iyo Shabbat Torah ain't het mitzaref le'isur chutz mi'revi'is Nazir. Shabbat Torah, because the Torah says Mishras. So the Gemara says, what's the difference between them? And the Gemara responds, Ika beinahu as follows: Did Rabbi Yochanan, according to the approach of Rabbi Yochanan that we saw on the bottom of Lamed Hey Amud Beis, where we saw that heter is mitzaref le'isur by Nazir, marbi afilu ochlen. He's talking even for solid foods. Masha'en came for Rabbi Lazar, he's not including foods. Rabbi Lazar, mashkin in midi achrina lo. According to Rabbi Lazar, it's only true by liquids. But had you eaten solid grapes, then they would not be mitzaref. Big chiddush between them. We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.